Okay, so today we're going to be moving on to in our geography, which is a little bit to do with science as well, so it's kind of a bit of both. We're going to be looking at what climate change is and what the effects of climate change are. So what is climate change? I just want you to pause the video now and just have a think of, have you heard of the word climate change? Do you know what it is? Do you know what we mean by climate change? And then once you've had a think about it or a discussion with anybody you're with, you can press play and we'll see what you know. Okay, so climate change is just the name that we give to when the weather or the temperature changes. Now, the problem with climate change is that because the temperature and the weather is changing, it is now affecting things on the planet and affecting animals and other challenging, it's causing more challenges to specific wildlife as well. And this is because of human activity and what we're doing on the planet to change this climate. Okay, so we're going to look at what the effect is and why humans are having that impact. So here's an example of something that you can see very different. So things here, if we look at the before picture, the then picture, and look at it now, we can see obviously there's a lot less water in the seas or the rivers, and we're going to find out why. Okay, so why is the world's climate changing? Okay, so over the last few years, something called industrialization has occurred, and that is where more and more use of technology, more and more use of more buildings, more things like machinery, things like using more of big factories to produce different products. Okay, because of that has got more and more and more. And because people have got more, this has led to more gases being released, which is causing the temperature to rise. Now, what we mean by this is, for example, when we burn fires, okay, we burn something called fossil fuels. Now, fossil fuels are things like coal that you burn, and what happens with those fossil fuels, they are burnt in things like power stations to make electricity, to make different power, okay, and in their homes as well to make heat, okay, but because of that it releases a gas, and we're going to look at that gas in just a minute. We also have more animals, so because of more animal farming, that also produces more gas, which we'll also have a look at. And then also because of crop farming, agricultural farming, you'll also find out why that affects climate today. So, which gases cause global warming? So, because of agriculture, manufacturing, and more people, we have something called a greenhouse gas effect, which is what we're going to look at very soon. So we've got things like when you boil water, okay, you boil for a cup of tea, cup of coffee, or to make your particular food that you're going to be boiling your vegetables, okay, you can make something called water vapour, which is when the water boils and hits boiling point and then turns into water vapour. So this creates, obviously, that's one type of gas. Okay, we then have coals, so when we burn things like coal and petrol to make for energy and to make for heat, or to help your cars run, we release something called carbon dioxide, which obviously we know as well we breathe out as humans. Okay, also carbon monoxide as well. Then we have methane, which is released, so things like cattle, animals, humans even, when they have their digestive systems and when they release gases out, for example cows, pigs and chickens, that's when they release this gas called methane. We also have something called nitrous oxide, which is also known as laughing gas. This is used a lot of the times in hospitals for like medicines and to help with pain medication, so that's obviously another type of gas. And then finally we have hydrofluoride, which is in a fridge, and that's used to keep the air conditions really cold to keep your food a good temperature. So here are just a few different gases which, because of humans, because of what we do, we are releasing more and more of these into the atmosphere, which is causing the climate to change. So what is a greenhouse? So if we think of what a greenhouse is, we think of it's a structure made with walls and a roof which are mostly made out of glass, and this provides a warmer condition in order for plants to grow. So all we mean by a greenhouse is somewhere which heats up and it keeps the area inside of it nice and warm to help the plants grow inside. So this is where the term greenhouse effect comes from, because if we have a look at this picture here, you can see, just like a greenhouse, okay, the sun's rays enter the Earth's atmosphere, so the heat from the sun hits into the atmosphere, into where we are on Earth. But because of this greenhouse effect, because of the more and more gases we're producing, it's almost causing a layer. Okay, and because of that, all the heat is then getting trapped inside of the in the atmosphere, which is basically causing it to get warmer and warmer. So this means that temperatures are increasing all over the planet, which is known as something called global warming, because the globe is warming up. These changes can have sometimes not very big changes, but sometimes can have a real dramatic impact on different places. Okay, so what is being affected by climate change? So global warming is the main cause of climate change, the warming of the temperature in the globe, in the atmosphere. Okay, this affects changes because it causes glaciers, which are areas where there's lots of ice, so things like Antarctica, Arctic, where there's lots of ice, they are shrinking because it is melting the ice caps. Okay, because it's melting, obviously we know when you melt an ice cube, it turns into water. So obviously that's causing the sea levels to rise because of more water from the ice caps, the ice glaciers, to be going into the seas and the oceans. So that's obviously causing the sea levels to rise. And then this is causing plant species shifting locations, because sometimes the right habitats are being destroyed because of the climate changing, because of rising sea levels. So species are having to move locations. Okay, and it's also obviously killing off some species as well, which are some animals and plants eat, which can also result in animals becoming endangered or becoming extinct, because obviously their habitats are changing. Now, we've looked a lot at habitats changing, and we understand what animals need to survive. So obviously if these change because of what humans are doing, we are going to find that plants and animals are going to start to become extinct or become endangered. So what is being done to combat it? What's being done to fight climate change? So it's been a really big push at the minute for everybody thinking that we need to do something about it, because it's just getting more and more, it's happening more and more. So most major countries around the world have adapted laws now that are meant to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases produced, and you will have started to see some of these. I'm sure you'll see some of these examples in just a second, where you have really spotted what we've changed in England today. So what is being done? So here are just a few places, few places in the world and what are being done to change it. So things like building more wind farms, solar farms, so that we are producing another way of and creating electricity. So because obviously we're doing it naturally, the wind pushes the wind turbine spins, and that spinning turns that into electricity for us to be able to use. Now, the benefit of this is that we're not having to burn what we call these fossil fuels, so we're not then releasing the gases into the air that way. Okay, we're stopping the manufacturing of petrol and diesel powered transport. So there has been a lot of cars now that are being changed into what we call electric cars, and we're reducing the amount of petrol and diesel being needed to power cars. So for example, you might think of probably the most well-known electric car at the minute is a Tesla. Okay, a Tesla has only really just recently been introduced as one of the first electric cars on the planet, and because of this means that we're not having to burn petrol and diesel, the fossil fuels, to make your cars run. You're able to use electricity so that it's not releasing any gases. But many people think that this is not happening quickly enough, and so we need to do more and more to really help to stop our country, to stop our world being heated up. So what are the consequences of not doing enough? So what will happen if we don't do enough? Okay, so unless we slow things down, experts and scientists have predicted that there could be some really serious consequences. So it could be that up to 30% of the Earth's wildlife could become extinct. So for example, polar bears that live in really cold conditions, if the ice melts, obviously that means their homes will disappear, as it will turn into like oceans and seas. So obviously it would make the polar bears become extinct, along with other animals. You've got up to 90% of the ocean's coral reefs will become lifeless. Now, I'm not going to go too much into that now, as next half term we'll be looking a lot at what a coral reef is, what's happening to the coral reefs, so that you can really understand that. Okay, the next thing, crops are dependent on rain. Crops dependent on rain will have, so it will mean that there'll be less rain because of the temperatures rising. So obviously things like crops, plants, and all different types of things that we need to make food, or for things to grow, obviously they will get less dependent on the rain, and we would start to have to produce some water. Okay, it could become to a drought happening because of temperatures rising, so plants not being able to grow, not being able to survive because the temperatures are too hot. And finally, low-lying settlements and habitats might become flooded because of the sea levels rising. It could lead to habitats becoming flooded. Okay, so we're going to have a look at some keywords now that are really involved in looking at the habitat. And what I would like you to do is, when I say pause the video, I want you to see if you can think about how could you describe that. Okay, so our first word is greenhouse gas. So pause it now. How could you describe greenhouse gas? Okay, greenhouse gas, you could say that this is the gases in the atmosphere which are causing our planet to heat up because it's stopping the heat from the sun escaping our atmosphere, because they're getting stuck in what we call a type of greenhouse idea to heat the planet up, leading to global warming. Okay, water vapour, what do we mean by water vapour? Okay, water vapour, this is where we say when we turn a liquid into a gas. So when you heat up a kettle, when you boil your water, and maybe to boil your carrots, that the water that's in the pot or in the kettle will turn into a gas, turns into water vapour, which is one of the gases which is leading to our greenhouse gas effect. Okay, the environment, what do I mean by the environment? So the environment is where we live. Okay, it's what do we know about it? Okay, it's what we can see. So our environment is looking at things like habitats, looking about temperatures, looking about climate, looking about what we can see in our current environment, our current space, and maybe what's changing. Carbon. Okay, carbon, we can think of things like carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide. Okay, they can obviously link to the gases that are being released into the atmosphere, as well as carbon being in other chemicals and other gases as well. Okay, a drought, what do I mean by a drought? Okay, a drought is where there's no rain, so it leads to, and because it's so hot, it means that everything drying up. Government. Now, what do we mean by the government? Okay, the government are the people that help to run the country. Okay, and they're in climate change, and we're talking about global warming. They're the ones that can really influence our abilities to make changes to the laws, to make changes to what we do in the country, to help to make the environment better and help our country and our planet Earth. Okay, protest. What do I mean by protest? Okay, protest means where if you're not happy with something, you will be saying that you're not happy about something, and you will go and show that by what we call protesting, by going out and saying, I don't agree with this, okay, which a lot of people are doing at the minute. They're protesting about the fact that we need to make this change, otherwise global warming and climate change is going to keep happening and eventually ruin our planet. Okay, carbon dioxide, obviously we've spoken about that. It's what we breathe out and what plants breathe in, but it's also what gets released into the atmosphere as well to cause that greenhouse gas effect. Methane, what is methane? So methane is the gas that is released when animals release things like pigs, cows, cattle, release their digestive system releases gases into the air. Farming, obviously we know that that is either cattle being with animals, or agricultural with crops. And finally, nitrous oxide, which is, what did we say nitrous oxide was? Okay, this was the laughing gas which is obviously when it is used in hospitals, but is one thing that is causing one type of gas, which is also leading to global warming. Okay, so I want you now to tell me about what global warming is, what greenhouse gas is, and the impact that it is having on our planet. So what I'd like you to do now, you can present this however you would like. You can either present it as a poster, a fact file, you could do it on PowerPoint or on a Word document. It's completely up to you. But you need to tell me, first of all, what global warming is. What do we mean by greenhouse gas, and why is that affecting things like global warming and climate change? And then also the impact that it is having on our country, and how it can lead to loss of habitats, loss of animals and species, and other problems as well. So if you need to go back through the video to find or look through the PowerPoint slides which are on Seesaw to give you some inspiration, that's absolutely fine. And you also might want to do a glossary to talk through some of the key vocabulary that we've just spoken about. You might want to do that as well on your information sheet as well. And then once you've finished everything, you can then put everything on Seesaw so that I can have a look at it.